Hey everybody, welcome back to Pro AV today. I am your host, Ben Thomas. You know, one of the things that I love most about our industry and really the umbrella of Pro AV as a whole is that there are so many different verticals and lanes inside of the industry, whether that's education, hospitality, healthcare, and even including broadcast, right? Broadcast is a community that almost existed sort of separately from Pro AV as a whole, even up to as recently as like 5 years ago. But you know, as folks like myself and many people in the industry have found their way into the Pro AV world, they've done it through the broadcast side. And most folks started in some form as an end user. And when you look at the broadcast world, the end user community, especially in the last 10 years, is driving the industry forward through technologies, accessibility, gear, things like that. So wanted to have a conversation today really specifically focused on the broadcast community, but also those end users in the community. So I said, look, there's a handful of people that I want to reach out to, and I got the first person that I reached out to because he is really someone who has a heck of a voice in the space, is doing a lot of teaching, training already in the NAB and the IBC communities, and that's Chris Black from Vizrt. Chris, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me.
Well, Chris, we'll kind of start on a high level, right? I mean, we had a chance to talk before the show started here, but you know, when you think about end users, it's so interesting because 10 to 15 years ago at the NABs of the world, it was very suit and tie, corporate business, only your engineer types. But now when you go to an NAB, when you go to an IBC, it's very creative driven. There's a lot of end users on the floor. There's people actually using the technology that is out there. Talk about how the end users have really driven a lot of that industry impact in the last decade or so.
Yeah, so when we talk about the end user, of course, these are the people that are going to be using the products on a day-to-day basis. Now, I come from the broadcast industry. I was a director for a long time. I was a user for a long time, just like you were. And there's the people that are making the decision traditionally, which was going to be, those older guys, gray hair, traditional broadcast engineer types that are going to these shows. But the end users are the ones that are actually using the product. And sometimes the engineers are not making the same decision that is going to be working best for the end user to be best able to actually tell the story, to be able to have the best tools to be able to create the video product. So the end user has becoming more and more influential in this process, influencing the budget, influencing the process of actually trialing the different pieces of hardware, software that they're going to be using. And IBC and NAB are big parts of that because that's where they can actually go to get hands-on on that product. At the same time, I think, there is also this trend that we're seeing of the products themselves growing up and becoming a bit more stretched over multiple verticals. We used to have broadcast products. We would have Pro AV products. And of course, you mentioned the Pro AV space goes into a lot of different verticals, but the core products within those, in this case, I've got my TriCaster here behind me. These tools have become more and more professional. They're becoming more and more professional grade. And as they become professional grade, the users, the people that have grown up using these products also are becoming professional grade operators that can then blur the lines between what you consider a Pro AV operator and a broadcast operator. And now it's really hard to give those two different titles. Now we can just say, these guys make video.
Yeah, I love the point that you made up too. As the worlds kind of blend together, different users find their ways into leveraging different technologies. And one example that I use all the time with folks is NDI, right? NDI, it took a minute for it to be adopted by the professional operators and communities, but it really started thriving in the smaller churches and the local smaller broadcast houses, things like that, eventually growing to the point where now it's an industry standard, not only in the broadcast community, but we like to use a lot of those protocols in the larger Pro AV community as a whole. When you think about maybe those newer technologies and whether it's AI, whether it's NDI, whatever, how does the end user drive a lot of those innovations and long-term adoption in the industry?
I think a large part of this is the availability of being able to actually get this equipment, be able to touch it, be able to actually use it at home. You have these directors in the broadcast world that are sitting there and they're directing broadcast every day, but they're also thinking about how they can do things better, how they can do things differently. Tools like NDI or SRT or any of these other protocols, they're now available for people to download at home. So these guys are just trying it out, plugging in their own cameras, getting their own switchers, and seeing what is capable. What they're learning, what they're seeing with this is these tools that were designed for the Pro AV world are extremely capable, and they've been maturing over the years as they've been in that Pro AV world. So now we're saying, well, hey, I've got a problem in the broadcast world. I don't want to have to bring over a bunch of SDI cable. I was playing with NDI the other day because it's free. Let's give that a shot and let's do it. So the capability of having software-defined tools that are free, that are easy to use, that people at home can experiment with, because in the end, we're talking about the end users, and end users are just people. They are the people that are going to be playing with these things and getting understanding how they're going to be working and then applying it to their own workforce and their own workplace. And now we're seeing it being adopted by the broadcast industry. So I think there is a lot of growth that we're seeing coming from that Pro AV world, and the ability that we're having with software where anybody can play with things, that is making it more capable and more available for the broadcast world.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned too is you talked about those end users driving some of those purchasing decisions, whether it's from an advocacy level or actually pulling out the credit card, right? What's been interesting is not only in technology, but really across B2B as a whole, the channel has kind of evolved, right? And as you see more of these advocates and these decision makers on the ground level being able, or who are familiar with being able to jump on bnh.com and buy whatever they want, have it tomorrow, right? Amazon, same deal. But the B2B channel and the broadcast channel and the Pro AV channels, traditionally, they want to go through the manufacturer, to the dealer, to the integrator, the installer, eventually to the end user. And what's kind of happened in one of the almost the crises that we're having right now as a global industry is that the end user is usurping a lot of these traditional channels because they're more educated than ever. They know how to install it, and they know how to support largely their own gear. What are some of the ways from the Vizrt and the manufacturer side, and obviously software provider side as well, have you seen that end user kind of break up that traditional channel a little bit?
Yeah, there is some really interesting things going on there.
That's a big question.
It is a big question. And, there's a lot of directions I can go with that answer, because as Vizrt, because we are a pretty large company, we are approaching it from many different directions. If you want to talk about graphics, let's talk about graphics for a second. We have a massive graphics portfolio. Parts of it are on the broadcast side, where you're going to be a major broadcaster, you're going to be doing huge virtual sets, AR graphics. You need big systems that have fantastic graphics cards to be able to run these things. This is not the kind of thing where an operator or a person is just going to go and pull out their credit card and buy one of these. This is a purchase from the broadcaster. They're going to go either direct to the vendor, or the broadcast company is going to go direct to the vendor, or they're going to go to one of the channel partners to help facilitate getting this graphic system merged with these broadcast systems and brought together. But if you take that a step back, let's take a look at what's going on with HTML5 graphics, for instance. You have Flowix, which is now VizFlowix, part of Vizrt. And this is something where you can just go to the Flowix website. You can sign up for a trial, and a regular person can go in here and start building graphics, and fantastic looking graphics that they can then start applying to their workflow with TriCaster, and then go back and build into their workflow and on their professional side as well. So there's a place for the different types of workflows, the different types of purchasing that different people are going to do. It all depends on what level is going to be within the broadcast workflow. The big pieces, you're still going to need to have the broadcaster actually work with the channel partners, or go direct to the vendor to handle it, or go to the system integrator to build out the whole portfolio. But we're going to see a lot more of these software as a service solutions, subscription-based platforms. And this is going to be giving it into the hands of the end user more and more and more and more as the future goes on.
And I tend to agree, right? Especially with those higher price point items, the traditional channel is there for a reason. It's designed to help support folks, and I transparently am a big fan of the traditional channel because it allows different people to become subject matter experts. Or if I need to go get extra training on one thing or another, I can either leverage my existing relationships or go to the manufacturer directly, which is one of the things I actually love about really what Vizrt is doing and really the whole portfolio as it continues to grow, is that there's always this renewed focus on education, whether it's at an end user level or the channel level. Talk about some of the ways that you've seen specifically on the end user side, really some of that training pay off, whether it's folks kind of aging into the industry and becoming decision makers, or just, being effective users of the tool.
Yeah, so we have an interesting thing that's happened with all of this over the years too. And one of the components that has been driving the education level that people have had is YouTube. Think about what you need to do when you. I was just in an island a few weeks ago, and then I was given a coconut for breakfast, and I was like, okay, I've got a coconut, great. I want to open this thing. So what do? I go to YouTube. How do I crack open this coconut? And there was a quick video there that showed me how to hit the coconut with the backside of a machete, pop it open, and get the coconut milk out. Now, I'm going to be doing the same thing if I wanted to find something going on with my TriCaster. How do I get a virtual set running with my TriCaster? How do I get the coconut milk out of my TriCaster? Click it up, look it up on YouTube. There we go. There's my video. I know how to now do it real quick. So that education level, the availability of that content at our fingertips has been driving a lot of the education for these tools, making people understand them better. And as the people that were first looking at YouTube clips for video games and things like that, they've grown up with that thought process in mind. They're now getting into the professional broadcast world, and they're using the same tools. At the same time, broadcasters and the companies like Vizrt are understanding that this is how people are learning how to do the tools. So we are adapting as well. We have Viz University, we have New Tech University, which are video-based learning platforms to help people get to understand the tools that they're using so that they can use it even better and get to be more professional with it. So it's all about the availability of the education out there being very, very easy to find. And then the companies like Vizrt adapting around that, turning that into full-on courses that pull in that video capability, but also give you more of those educational tools that are also being more modernized and being adopted by education companies or universities to be able to help them learn how to use the systems.
And it's such an interesting point to talk about too, because as the industry continues to evolve on the broadcast side, I don't want to say we've reached a point of saturation with technology. We haven't necessarily, but when you look at the leaps and bounds of innovation that have been happening over the last 10, 15 years with innovations like technology, like NDI, you mentioned SRT, a lot of those protocols have had time to marinate a little bit now. So a lot of the technologies that we see in the broadcast world are similar in nature, right? There's obviously different feature sets, different, infrastructure setups, things like that. But education plays such a massive part of that, especially on the thought leadership side, right? I was having a conversation with a technical director from a church last week, and he was talking about the importance of actually Vizrt, and he has mentioned something similar with a competitor. But, he talked about how manufacturers and software providers have been so much more willing to have conversations outside of a product or specific software ecosystem. Talk about the importance of the thought leadership side, right? Being able to train people in different environments or teach them maybe career paths and places that they can go in the industry. How important is that role of thought leadership, not only from a manufacturer and a provider standpoint, but from just an industry and even association standpoint?
The biggest thing that I'm thinking about here is that for every type of production, you need to look at how you can do things differently. You need to be able to adapt to that production's needs. If you're a house of worship, if you are a government, or if you're a broadcaster, the pieces may be the same. You're going to have camera, you're going to have a switcher, you're going to need to be able to move video files, but the way that you're putting together the production is going to be vastly different. And that's where the thought leadership piece comes into this. First of all, you need to understand, okay, this is a problem that somebody had. We found this solution this way. Let's now share that idea with everybody else so they can all see how that solution was solved. And they might find something within how these people found the solution that may help them as well. But at the same time, we also have to look at how the technology is evolving. The thing about technology is it never stops. It keeps on changing and changing and evolving and evolving. And so in the broadcast companies, as well as the vendors, are constantly looking at how we can take new technologies, put them in place to be able to help the broadcaster. And the thought leadership piece of that is also very key here too, because as we find these solutions, we have to figure out how we can apply them to the needs of the end user. So through different types of thought leadership, by talking to people who are experimenting with these, who are looking at different types of solutions, we're able to share that information with the broader industry, with the broader group of end users, so that they can get an understanding, start getting some ideas, and start trying it out for themselves and finding, again, new ways to use the technology.
Well, Chris, last question here, and then we'll kind of land the plane. You know, we've talked about obviously how the end user has impacted the channel, the buying cycle, the gear, product development, training, things like that. You know, what are some of the things going into the next maybe 5-10 years where if you had a crystal ball, you could say, hey, you know, these are some ways that folks are going to be able to better educate and reach and engage end users? Is it through short form content? Is it through micro training sessions? You know, what are some of the ways that you anticipate end users seeing some of that, being able to create value for end users in some of those channels?
Yeah, so there's a few different directions that we can go with that one as well, of course. I want to mention our channel partners for a moment too, because what the channel partners are very important for us because they're getting closer and closer to the end user. Vizrt as a company, we are a global organization. We are looking at the entire world, whereas our channel partners can be focused into just, for instance, Texas, and be very close to the end users within Texas and be able to have those conversations with them to be able to get them to, the micro training sessions, be able to give them some hands-on, some equipment, and help better understand what their specific needs are. But then if we pull it back from the channel partners, and again, it's going to be these little snippets that you're going to see that you constantly get on things like on YouTube, on Instagram, on all of these different video channels where you have a single thing that you're trying to achieve. You're able to find that one thing that you need to achieve and be able to apply it to your workflow. So I think there's going to be a hybrid approach that's going to be going forward for people learning new platforms, becoming more comfortable with the platforms. We've all grown up now using video. We understand how we can search for video, how we can find the things that we need to understand, be able to apply them to the graphics. And this is why we're getting more technically savvy as the software-defined systems are also becoming more robust. But there does need to be some work done on the vendor side to be able to make these training courses, these bite-sized pieces of information more available for the end users. So 5 years down the road, I think we're going to be seeing most people actually learning things from these hybrid university courses that we see totally online, plus being able to go and touch and feel working with these systems themselves. And a lot of the systems that we see today, which are going to be hardware-based, are going to be software-based and available in the cloud. So you don't necessarily need to go to a facility where you have the production switcher right there. You can just open up a web page, have a virtualization of that production switcher or whatever tool that you're needing there, have the video right beside it, and then be able to start learning on your own at home. So when you go to work the next day, you've already got the knowledge in place and you can start applying that for your next production.
Chris, that was an incredible answer. It was a fantastic conversation that we had. You mentioned Texas, by the way. Got to shout out TAB. our local broadcast association down here doing incredible work. But Chris, we got to find a way to get you back on the show. This was a ton of fun, and there's always new conversations, new technologies always evolving in the industry. So Chris, we appreciate you coming on the show this afternoon.
All right. Thanks a lot.
And thank you so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe and tune in next time to Pro AV Today.